we're going to be talking about how COVID-19 has changed the way that we interact with our elected. At the beginning of the series, we talked at the basics, how a bill becomes a law. We talked about how to tell your story, powerful communication skills. And so this is going to cap us off with how is the best way to communicate, interact, testify, all in the virtual and remote space that we are currently living in. I am really pleased by our panelists today. We have two county council members who their counties led the way in the virtual legislative process. And we have a state representative who has been having hearings virtually and still connecting with community. So just a couple of light housekeeping things. I noticed that when you all are entering, you're muted, and that's fantastic. Thank you for that. If you could enter any questions you have in the chat, and then I'm going to be pulling them along with Sandy Ma from Common Cause, who's going to help with the gathering questions from folks. We're going to do a kind of set series of questions, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So please, if something comes to mind as they're answering, or you want to follow up on something, put it in the chat box. We'll make sure that it gets asked. As we mentioned before, this is being recorded. So you can definitely go back and view it, share it. We hope that you do. We really want these to be kind of foundational and to help you in the advocacy that you want to do in your community to make a change. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the facilitator for today, which is Lisa Maruyama from Hano. So take it away, Lisa. And Lisa, you're up there.
Yeah, sorry. I fell for the very consistent trap of muting myself and then forgetting to unmute. But hi, everyone. Good afternoon and Happy New Year. So excited that you could join us for this, the last in our series with the partners that Kathleen mentioned. And as she mentioned, I'm with Hano, Hawaiʻi Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, and we're very committed, along with our partners, to ensuring that anybody and everybody, and any citizen in the state of Hawaii is able and supported to be able to participate in our process, our political process. And so we're here today to feature some wonderful women, some wonderful wahine across the state who are going to share their mana'o with us around how we can engage in this pandemic. With all of the rules changing over time, we want to make sure that all of you can participate in the ways that you want to participate. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. Joining us, we have three women, as I mentioned. Keani Rawlins-Fernandez is a Molokaʻi native and mother of an 11-year-old and 9-year-old. She's the vice chair of the Maui County Council, chair of the Budget, Finance, and Economic Development Committee, and she holds the seat for the Molokaʻi residency area. So she's a graduate of Molokai High School with her bachelor degree in public relations from Hawaii Pacific University, and a master's degree in business administration. Oh, and a law degree with certificates specializing in environmental law and Native Hawaiian law from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So much expertise to share with us. Also joining us is Felicia Cowden. She's beginning her second term as a Kauaʻi County Council member. All 7 members represent the islands of Kauaʻi and Niʻihau. Felicia is from the North Shore with a history in business, engineering, education, and media. So also coming to the table with a lot of expertise and mana'o. She has experience over really the last 3 decades in community advocacy. So again, has a lot to share. Jeanné Kapela was born in Kona and raised on a small coffee farm in the nearby town of Captain Cook. She's worked in programs and she's graduated from Konawaena High School, and she served on numerous community boards, including the Kona Coffee Farmers Association. And she's worked in programs and advocacy work to end the sexual exploitation of people through education. So she was elected in 2020 to serve the State House District 5, and her priorities include protecting Hawaii's agricultural industry, championing the needs of working families, and delivering universal health care and combating climate change. So welcome to the three of you. Thank you so much for taking your time on a Sunday afternoon with us to talk about this topic, as Kathleen mentioned, of how we can be better engaged in this time of COVID. So I'm going to ask each of our panelists actually to take some time, about 5 minutes each, to just kind of provide some opening remarks about how moving to virtual platforms in the time of COVID has actually impacted each of your work, how you're engaging with community members, and et cetera. And then we'll follow up after each of your contributions, your kind of your opening remarks, with some questions that we've prepared, the hosts have prepared. And then, as I think it was Sandy and Kathleen mentioned, you're all welcome to put your questions into the chat box, and Sandy and Kathleen will help facilitate those questions. So we actually, in the next, almost hour and a half, hope to be able to cover all of that. So with that, I would like to ask, in the order that I introduced you, Council Member Rawlins-Fernandez, to actually start with just your opening remarks.
Aloha mai kākou, and mahalo to Hano, to Common Cause and Hawaiʻi Children's Action Network for hosting these invaluable workshops for our community. They're so important, and I'm honored to have been invited to present today. So at the Maui County Council, I'm the budget chair, and last year we were preparing to go into budget session, and that's when the pandemic shut everything down. And so as I saw it worsen in the other states, knowing that it was likely going to arrive in Hawaii, within a couple of weeks, and I quickly worked with the chair of our council to get everyone working from home, and then that way we wouldn't be in the middle of budget session, trying to figure out how to transition from being in person to doing everything remotely, virtually. And so we were able to quickly purchase all the necessary hardware, expand internet for our support staff, for all of our office staff to be able to work from home, and council members as well. So I led that transition, and we had a very successful budget session. We continued to take live virtual testimony. That was critical for me, for our council, because we were going into budget session, and budget is so important to get feedback from our community members. So I didn't want to take that away from them. People aren't always able to express everything that they want to and need to in written testimony. And so enabling our community members to continue to give live testimony, either via video or audio through their phone, was really important. During the day that we were reviewing budgets, we had over 80 testifiers. And that's about the amount that we would have received in person. So that was an indicator for me that it was going really well. I think we received a lot of positive feedback. The community was able to see all of our faces. We continue to have our meetings on our community television, Akaku, on channel 53. And we eventually also started to consistently live stream our meetings on Facebook. So really taking the meeting to where the people are. And I wanted to quickly share screen to show our community members and those interested how to, oh, okay, I need to be a host for a moment, and then I'll give you the host back.
Is that you, Sandy, or Kathleen, who would be able to give Councilmember
Oh, okay.
Rawlins-Fernandez host?
All right, it says
got
I'm
it?
not a co-host. I got it.
Great.
Okay, so I'll quickly show everyone where to go to submit written testimony or to testify at the meeting. Okay, so you go to mauicounty.us/agendas and it'll take you to this landing page. On this landing page, you'll see, you'll see the meeting agenda. And if you click on the agenda, you'll see the agenda has the testimony link. So we use Blue Jeans. And so we, as the committee chairs, we try to keep the same meeting link and number, meeting code, so that it's as easy as possible to minimize confusion and help our community be able to navigate on this new platform. And then if the person would like to, oh, sorry, this one was a really long agenda, but there's here. So at the bottom of the agenda, if you are unable to join the video conferencing platform, then you can dial by phone, and it has the phone number here and then the meeting code. On the landing page, you also have the meeting details, which provide you some of the meeting documents and archived videos, as well as you get to watch it live here. And then here is where you would submit your written testimony. You click on e-comment, and then you choose the item that you would like to provide testimony on, and you would click comment, and you would submit your testimony there. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. And yeah, mahalo for allowing me to provide that presentation.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. And it's nice to be able to share screens. Sometimes when we're in person, it's harder to actually walk people through things like that. So these are some of the silver linings of virtual engagement. So mahalo for that. So let's have Council Member Cowden next to share with us, same question. How has going virtual changed the way you're engaging with your constituency?
Well, thank you so much. And I would say it has changed substantially. And I'm a heavy extrovert, so I really like face-to-face. I like talking to people. I'm a council member from Kauaʻi and Niʻihau. Mostly the Niʻihauan people live a little bit separate. So for the most part, most of our interaction is with the people of Kauaʻi. And you know, we are a smaller island, and both physically and population wise. So a lot of what we do is informal. I know that I have really grown quickly to realize how much work was actually done at the community events and dinners, and even walking around the administrative building, and so much informal discussion would happen. And by going community to community, you know, I'm able to be out there and talk to people and bring up what's going on. We have closed our building from like late March, maybe early April. It hasn't reopened. There was a time when there was almost no staff in the building and no staff at the admin building. So people were working from home. And it really was a deep contraction. When we've got a lot of nonprofits on the line here, I want to tell you how important all our community organization partners are. Never underestimate how critically important it is to hear from you. I know maybe in November, our island, we decided to step away from the the statewide quarantine. And we didn't hear from the Visitors Bureau or the Chamber of Commerce, two really, really important groups. And they have a lot more access to the mayor than we do. So when we didn't hear them stressing, I assumed that they were part of the admin's decision. And, they weren't happy. And it was tough, like hearing about that after the fact. And we have really important organizations like the Board of Realtors, certainly, the Children's Justice Center, all of the social services. So please always feel that you're not only welcome to, but wanted to voice up, because these are a lot of complex issues, and it's really critical that we hear from people. I wrote notes about looking at what Maui has. Of course, I'm going to suggest it to our staff, because we might as well be on Facebook, right? That would be good. People can watch us live on our Kauaʻi.gov website, and we are on our Hawaiʻi television. But I think if we were on Facebook, that might be a lot more effective. We have people calling in. They can testify for about 6 minutes. Typically, they would be testifying at the very beginning of our session about anything throughout the day. And we, for the most part, just have maybe less than 5 people who are testifying about anything. A lot might be 10. And so I know that we aren't hearing from enough. When people are testifying as they're driving in their car, or they've got their kids or whatever else, what I do like about that authentic presentation is they're more comfortable. They tend to be not so nervous, and we hear deeper, what their perspective is and why. And oftentimes they're right in their place there. We have people can call 241-4188 and sign up to be on our Teams meeting. That's what we utilize. When I look at what are some of the blessings, if people wanted to testify, it takes half a day to come and have your 3 minutes or 6 minutes of testimonial time, where now you can just do it briefly in the morning, but then they aren't there to hear about all the rest of it. Like normally we have a full chamber, and in the break, we're talking story with them on the mezzanine. There's a lot of really important times. Mm-hmm. I would say what is not as good for sure is that the interactions are too narrow. We don't get enough. What is good is that we can have people from other islands and further away. And I know prior to being elected, I spent about between 10 to 20% of my income, my gross income, to go over to Oahu to be able to testify for 2 or 3 minutes. And that's an enormous barrier. And I hope that that's a barrier that comes down for the state legislature, because it feels a bit Oahu-centric, the way the decisions are made, and very narrow amount of people who get over there to testify. I have so much to say, but I look forward to the questions. So never underestimate how important you are to the process, and please do try. And I go do house calls too. I will show up on the beach with people, or go for a walk outside in the breeze, but I'm happy for a face-to-face, but I can't do it in the building.
We appreciate those values, Council Member Cowden, that you're willing to do house calls and et cetera, and look to creative and alternative ways to engage. So let's follow up with Representative Kapela, and she'll come up with the end of this, and just in terms of the 5-minute introductory comments.
Aloha, everyone. Mahalo for joining us. And thank you to the many organizations that put something like this together. You know, I think I started as an advocate, and I think many who often end up working in the county council or in the legislature often start as advocates because we see something that we want changed that's not happening yet. And the best way to do something is to go and do it. So I really appreciate each and every single one of you being here and this opportunity to speak alongside these two incredible women. I am from Hawaii Island, so District 5, and that represents and encompasses Naʻalehu, Ocean View, Captain Cook, Kealakekua, and Kailua Kona on the west side of Hawaii Island. And this is my first time as a legislator. So I don't have, yay, I know I'm so excited, but I don't have the same exact experience as our council members. So for me, a lot of it has been, it's not necessarily how COVID has changed how I interact, but really how it's shaped how I'm interacting. I have always been someone who really values personal connections. And I think Councilmember Cowden really touched upon the fact that so many intricacies of the legislative process really happen face-to-face in like small moving parts where you're crossing each other in the hallway or you're standing outside and chatting with a colleague or with an advocate. And we now don't necessarily have those opportunities, but what we do have is this incredible opportunity to open up the legislative doors to our neighbor islands. And that's kind of one of the things that I'm most excited about. For years, coming from such a rural part of Hawaii Island, you have to take off half a day of work or a full day of work. You have to pay for your airline ticket all the way there, your hotel room or your car, if that's something that you have to do as well, or you have the budget to do. And that's just not accessible. So now we have this equal access opportunity, and that's really special. So I really hope that, I know that my community will really capitalize on that. And I think that many others will as well across our state. I think one thing that I've noticed is that the Capitol has always kind of seemed like this very closed off place where the things that we want to see happen or the advocates that are fighting for something don't always know what's happening in that building. And because our Capitol building is closed as well to the public, I really want to be someone who will not just help break down the ceiling, but also breaks down the walls around the building. So one thing that I will say is that you have to reach out to your representatives and your senators. Send them an email, send them a call their office, call their staff, and continue to do that. And I really appreciate the people in my community who have done that, because as I really set things up, I've communicated a lot via social media and through radio and now newspapers, and trying to find unique ways of communicating with people who don't have social media or internet connection and internet access, because in more rural parts of our communities, many people don't have that. But if you have new ideas, feel free to put them in the chat box as well. Things that you think we should be doing and implementing, we want to hear from you. For me, I'm new to this and I have so much to learn, and I want to soak up as much of it as possible. And it starts a lot of it with you folks. So feel free to chime into the chat box, to send me an email, or to knock on my virtual door, I guess, through social media. But overall, at the Capitol, we have been doing hearings through mostly through Zoom. And if you're a public member and you wanted to participate, we've been doing them through Facebook. We do have a new process, and our Sergeant at Arms for the House and the Chief Clerk's office have been working very hard since, I believe, June, to put together a new platform. So we will be continuing, it'll be through Zoom as well, but every single neighbor island person, as well as if you are a part of a national organization or are working on a national piece of legislation that is being heard at the state capitol, you now can bring in those national advocates to talk and do something through Zoom as well. So that's a really exciting opportunity that we have, and that will all be shared via YouTube. So I wish we were doing something like the Maui County Council with Blue Jeans, and you can call in and you can just have so many different options. I think ours is a little bit more limited, but it's there. And that's the main thing. And that's what's so exciting. So I'm excited to continue this conversation and share a little bit more as well.
Mahalo, Rep. Kapela. Now, just an addendum to that. Can you clarify? I think for the House members, you're all actually going to be participating in the legislative process in person, correct? So,
yeah. Yes,
okay.
So we will be at the state capitol, which is a little bit nerve-wracking for neighbor island members like myself, where we have to participate. All votes have to be taken in person and all hearings have to be done in person, but we will be doing it virtually. So in the same room from just a computer.
Right.
Yes, but we will be there in person. And if you are located on Oahu, there are some members who meet in person. So if you wanted to meet in person with your legislator, I would suggest sending an email or setting up an appointment, because all appointments have to be made ahead of time. It has to be something that that legislator is comfortable with. I am comfortable with an in-person meeting. And if you wanted to meet with my office, I'm more than happy to do that. But we would have to schedule it in advance. And that's the way that the process works. There's only one entrance into the building with a temperature scan, and that's just kind of how it is for now. But that is a possibility as well if that's something you want.
Great. So I understand House members, when you testify virtually in Zoom, you will see actually physically present all House members in the committee hearings or on the House floor. On the Senate side, I understand, just to add a little bit more intelligence to this, is the Senate has chosen to go optional. So some Senate members are in person and some will be zooming in for their hearings. So when the testifier is in Zoom, you may see some of the Senate members, but not all, as I understand it. Yes, so I just wanted to make that clarification. Okay, great. So thank you to the three of you for those opening remarks. And we have a few more questions lined up before we head to, there's some questions formulating in the chat box, and I appreciate that our panelists are actually attempting to answer them in the chat box. So for those of you who are not aware, not tracking chat, please go look there, because some of the Q&A is actually happening already. I think many of you have asked the question or answered the question already that we had of, how you're re-engaging, how you're dealing differently with your constituents. For instance, Councilmember Cowden basically said she's happy to meet you on the beach or outside and socially distance. She can do house calls. So we appreciate that you're creatively thinking about that. Actually, Rep. Kapela has said that she's open to receiving members actually at her office, but anybody who visits her will have to go through, I believe it's the basement of the legislature, of the Capitol, where you have to do a check-in, temperature check, etc. You have to have I understand you have to have had a appointment already made. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, you must be on a list in advance in order to show up at the Capitol. You can't just kind of wander around like many of us are used to. You can't hang out at the railings anymore. If you make an appointment, I understand with Rep. Kapela, you will be escorted back down and out of the building as soon as your appointment is done, unless you have another appointment officially scheduled with someone else, in which case you will be escorted from one office to the other, or you will have to go down, check in again, and go back up, escorted to the next office. So all of it is being regulated during this time of COVID. But we appreciate that many of the three of you are thinking about different ways to engage with your constituency and to actually continue to be able to hear from them. And you're actually encouraging your constituents to reach out in creative ways as well. So thank you for that. For the council members, we have questions for you. Actually, you've already answered this particular question for the two council members. I think Council Member Rawlins-Fernandez said that you have a wonderful outcome, that your testifier, the numbers of your testifiers hasn't really changed as a result of your going virtual. So that's fantastic. And also for Cowden, Councilmember Cowden, you said you would actually appreciate more people being able to participate in this process. So was there a significant drop in the number of participants after you went virtual, Councilmember Cowden?
I would say yes, although this is just the beginning of my second term, and I would say there's a significant drop between the council before me and then the one that I began at. I I've actually attended council meetings for about 5 or 6 years pretty actively, and then for a few decades when I'm representing different interests. And interestingly, we all get along pretty well on our council. And I don't know, maybe there's not enough theater. I think when we've had councils that fight, then it seems like the room's full. I don't know why it has gotten lighter, but I would say it is unnervingly light, our amount of testimony. So listening to Council Member Rawlins-Fernandez, I'm going to ask if we can't put ours on Facebook. Somehow we got to get people engaging more, because we have very, very big issues, and it feels like relatively silent input.
Councilmember Rawlins-Fernandez, did you want to respond to that? I saw you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Mahalo, Lisa. Yeah. So we also, so like my staff and other council members' staff will try to get the word out via social media, email with their networks. That way, and you send the link, you attach the link in the post, and you just try to make it as easy as possible for members of the community to participate. And in fact, we've had more of our community able to participate with video conference, such as one of our advocates for those who are unsheltered right now, had her phone and took, logged on to the video conference and was able to help those who are unsheltered provide testimony, which we have never really, had before. And not only, did we get their testimony, but they were able to testify from where they were. And they were able to share with us the experiences and what they're seeing, what they're experiencing every day, where they were located. And that was really helpful for the members to be able to see, as well as, for our farmers, for those being able to have their phones once again, in the field, and we're able to testify from the field. We have to show us their farm. Sorry, kind of scattered. So we have a list of on Google spreadsheet that shows everyone as they sign up, and that way you have an idea of when it'll be your turn to testify. For example, when we had 80 people signed up to testify, they were able to continue doing their work, or things around the house, or homeschooling their children, and they're able to track which testifier is next, so that they know when it'll be their turn to testify. And so like for the farmers, being able to show us their farm, because we're trying to increase food security, and it's just all that visual impact is really important.
Go ahead, Councilmember Cowden, you wanted to
Yeah,
say...
I wanted to add a couple other things. So like, because we don't have enough testimony, I work really hard to get it out there. Like it happens, I do talk radio on Kauaʻi Community Radio. So this Tuesday, one of the subject matters we'll have is the shoreline setback ordinance that is under development, our new policy. So I'm having our shoreline setback specialist as a guest on the show to be putting that out, to get people to be listening. And then I post it on social media, and I try and promote that. And I found that, I've been really actively making phone calls to, when we're doing our housing, I'm calling different big developers and saying, have you seen this? What do you think? And not always are they aware of what we're doing. So it seems like having to put it out that way, it might be that maybe, as I'm getting an idea, our mayor, he does a video every week. So I'm going to write this note down to myself as maybe our council chair, maybe he can do a county council piece and put it out. I on my show, I do a county council report and I say what all we're going to be doing the next day. But my show's the day before the meeting, so it's pretty tight. You know, it's not early enough to really give people good notice. But we have to get aggressive to get the word out to get people to comment.
And again, for all three of you, are there locations, you know, whether it's the community college, or are there centers where there might be internet access for those who might be houseless, homeless, who don't have access even maybe to a phone? Are there ways in which they could testify from other mobile sites or, you know, other sites in your communities?
There are a few, but it's not very easy. And we have 5 houseless encampments on our island. I worked very hard to create those beautiful spots on the beach. Downside of those beautiful spots on the beach, though, is there's almost no internet access there, or cell phone access. So that's the problem. We're working on having community advocate resources to be out in the neighborhood centers on certain days of the week. What I'm finding is people are getting so distressed at our government policy. Suicide isn't too strong of a word to use as, sorry about that motorcycle. People become depressed to the point of suicidal and angry to the point, it's mostly all state policy that they're actively angry at, but it is certainly county policy, as you know, our economy is collapsing and our people are being displaced. We've got a lot of people moving here from somewhere else, even buying sight unseen. We have a big push coming in, and then we have those who are able to afford it leaving. And so it's a crisis. If I was typing it, it would be in all caps.
One
Understood.
really resource that I've seen, and that I think I'm really excited to continue to push in my own community, is our public libraries. One of the best spaces that we can utilize. I'm really excited about the new Na'alehu library. They just got the funds to add a 3rd portable to their library. And then a lot of our libraries across the state are now getting these laptops that also have like the camera at the top, so people can do the Zoom in, or the Blue Jeans, or however it is that they can connect with their community leaders. And I think that that's probably one of the best ways and the best avenues that all people who don't have, from the those who are houseless or unsheltered, to those who just don't have internet access in their homes, or in rural communities like my own, our libraries are the best place that they can go to and utilize. And if you do have your own device, they do have Wi-Fi as well. And that Wi-Fi does work in the parking lot outside if you are more comfortable in an outside space. So
that's a great point, and great reminder about our library system is a really, in my humble opinion, an underutilized resource in our communities. So thank you for making that point. And Councilmember Rawlins-Fernandez, I see you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I'll quickly add what we've been doing. So in Hana, there's really bad internet, and so there's a digital bus that goes there.
Oh,
and
cool.
Internet there. And you know, a big shout out to the broadband Hui, who is really making strides to increase or to reduce the digital divide and increase more accessibility to the internet. On Molokai, my office is open and available for those if they need to testify. And
nice.
I'm not sure on Lanai, but when things kind of get a little more under control, one of the things I'd like to have is a center with a laptop that our staff can help those to come to the county building when it's safer for those to be able to testify. And that's something that I've been, you know, that I campaigned on, having this as a Molokai resident. This has really helped to equalize testifiers. in Maui County, you know, those that live on Maui are able to testify in person. And if you want to take off from work, fly over, you know, rent a car, then you're able to also testify in person. But that was, you know, some of the gaps there was unequal. But with the video testimony or, you know, call-in, it's been more equalized.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thank you for reminding about the digital bus in Hana. That's a nice resource. So, okay, moving on. Thank you, because that was part of our questioning, is just how are we addressing some of the inequitable issues that, you know, has arisen in our communities across the state. So that was really helpful. So again, these are questions. Our next question is actually for Rep. Kapela around the legislature. Do you have anything to share additionally from what we've already talked about around remote testimony? Any tips, anything that our attendees today should know about how to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I explained earlier, everything will go through Zoom.
Mhm.
The access to where you should submit or what you should be submitting on will be that those Zoom types of links will, or yeah, just the information will be on the, what do you call it? The hearing notice. They're now being, it will be updated to include more of this digital platform and more information that way. One thing that I will say is that every single person will have to submit testimony through the Capitol website. So in prior years, people would submit directly to that rep that is the vice chair for a certain committee, or they would submit it directly to the committee email, or they would fax it in. The only way that you can submit testimony is through the Capitol website. So I would highly suggest, if you don't have a Capitol website login, please go and make one. That's the best way that you can track a bill, that you can figure out more about different legislators, find out who your legislator is, what they're introducing, because there's also information about what that person has introduced, and how you can actually track in live time through live status those specific pieces of legislation that you're interested in. But that's the only way that you will be able to submit testimony. And if you wanted to submit, I wish I would have put together, and we just found out this information last week. It hasn't even been fully public yet, and they're still tweaking little things here and there. But I wish I would have had something like Councilmember Rawlins to be able to put together like a Zoom thing to show you all. But I believe, do look for those types of things in the future, because I do think that, I know my office will definitely put one together. Hopefully we can work together as well to just do a Zoom platform on how you will now be able to work this new digital platform that they're still working on. But definitely go and make your Capitol website login. And if you want to do a virtual testimony and speak up on something, which I will say, having been an advocate and having gone to the Capitol to testify, it is so much more impactful to be there in person and for them to see your voice, to see your passion, to see your trauma and your anger, or your hope for something better. But if you have this opportunity to testify virtually, definitely take, and you can definitely do that extra step to be there and show your face, whether you're in your car, as some of the other council members were talking about, or you're in your home or in your office, wherever you are, do it, because it makes a big difference. And you'll only be able to do that. Only those who have clicked the button to say that they want to testify virtually through the Capitol website will get the link to be able to do that. So you have to follow the process, and it's it'll go out 24 hours before, and you have to follow that process. Otherwise, you won't get the link in time, and the link will come out, I believe, about 3 hours prior to the hearing. So really make sure that you're on top of it if that's something that you want to do and advocate for.
And thank you very much, Rep. Kapela, for that information. And I've put a couple resources in the chat box. One is the actual link to the Capitol website, where Rep. Kapela urges you to actually create sign in and create a profile, create an account if you haven't yet, because then you'll be ready to respond in the way that she suggests. And then another resource is the public access room. That's really publicly funded resource that is physically nested within the Capitol, but is just a wonderful, wonderful educational resource for understanding and navigating the legislative process. That's called the PAR, Public Access Room. And I love that we're a co-learning community, and that Chet Okayama has actually posted ways in which you can submit testimony. So appreciate that, Chet, and that everybody's got resources here in this Zoom room today. And so thank you for sharing that. Another thing that just following on Rep. Kapela's information is I understand there will be a very short notice. The legislature this session is going very fast. They are discouraging new money bills because of the challenges to the state budget and all of the decisions that are having to be made. They are not taking late testimony, as I understand it, just because they're going to be going so fast. So just a few little things to add to Rep. Kapela's information. And if anybody else has intelligence, please do share with all of us. We're all helping each other out here. I
do wish I had
takes a
more
village
to share, but it is really coming as it is, and kind of still putting it together to then be released to the public.
Yep, good point. Good point. Is there? I know this is really hard because this next question that we have might be an unfair question. It really is about if you have any sense about when your capitals would be open to the public. And I know certainly here on Oahu, our numbers are going up. Maui's numbers are going up as well. Is there any information about whether for legislative session, is it going to be the entire session that it'll be virtual, et cetera?
Yeah, so for the Maui County Council, we're actually planning to continue remote and virtual meetings even when the pandemic ends, because it's been really great for us. It'll likely not be exclusively held remotely or online. I'm looking at advocating for committee meetings to be held online and then council meetings in person. But as far as projecting when our county building and the council will be meeting in person again,
so hard to predict, right?
We're planning to continue what we're doing for the rest of the year, I think.
Sure. Okay. Appreciate that. Councilmember Cowden?
I don't think that we have any kind of open date. I'd say Kauaʻi has been the most cautious of all the islands. And that will probably continue, but I know I will as soon as we can be open. I really feel like we work much better when we have the people in the room. To me, there's very little comparison to it. So we don't have any kind of date at this point, but when we're past it, I would like to see these remote ways to testify so that people can testify without having to take a half day off. And when we get the examples of like houseless at the beach or farmers in the field or teachers in the classroom, that's preferable if we can keep that kind of thing going. But I think there's a whole lot lost by not really seeing the people and having the bonding that goes on even between people who are opposed to an issue. When you have people who are divergently opposed to something and that they're in there and they're talking story at, on what I'll say the mezzanine in the breaks, a lot of coming together happens just organically. That doesn't occur right now. And so I will definitely be pushing to go back to what we have had, but we are the smallest county physically, and so it's easier for us than say Maui or Hawaii.
Sure, thank you, appreciate that. Our next question is for Rep. Kapela again around the legislative process, and we've heard that in years past, written testimony isn't really received until the last minute for the public official. So it's really hard to kind of impact or provide that information to the public official. Have you heard anything about how that practice might change? How can we advocate for members to receive testimony more, with more advanced notice, just so that there's a deeper understanding of the issue when it does come up for hearing?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I think it's really wonderful. As someone who's worked as staff, I will say that testimony, we get it to people when we receive it. So as advocates here, and you're fighting for something, if you know your issue and you know that you have this opportunity to testify, get your piece of testimony in as soon as possible. That's probably the biggest helpful hint that I could ever say. Because truthfully, if it's late and as staff, you're running it in at the very last minute, which we can't do anymore, that testimony is just not going to be heard, and it's not going to be read, and it's not going to be seen. And there's no way that you can get it to that person when their inbox is already flooded with emails. So I would say, go and set up your Capital account and if you have specific bills that you want to have heard, you can put like an email notice. So when that bill is going to be put on it's going to be heard in a hearing, you can get an email notice that'll tell you, go and testify or submit your testimony now. And that's so great. Utilize that, please, please. It will be up to the chairs on when those packages will be released to members. I know many chairs like to release it the night before. So if you have a morning hearing, you at least have the evening to read it. Sometimes it's not released until 5 o'clock at night, and therefore a legislator is not going to see it until the morning if they're coming in really early to prep for that 8 a.m. hearing. But the biggest thing that I can say is just submit your testimony as quickly as you possibly can. And if you have something that you're passionate about and you know that other people are passionate about it as well, have testimony like pre-written or just ready so that you know it's going to be able to get in on time. That's really it. And I mean, if you want to advocate, I would advocate to the specific chairs on making sure that testimony gets to their members as quickly as possible, but it really is up to those specific chairs, and everyone does it differently.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good tips. So I think at this point, we talked about some of the equity issues and connectability issues around, lack of Wi-Fi. A question finally from us as your hosts is, what's the most creative way a community member has communicated with you or testified?
Right. I think we talked about this a little bit in the prep for it. It's when people are, say, driving into work, or I find that we are amused and warmed as we're watching people testify, because they're testifying wherever they're at that moment, and it tends to be much more authentic that way. I really like it. People can give a written testimony, but if they're speaking from their heart right there, you can just feel, where they're coming from. And I find that when people are doing it ad hoc in the moment, they tend to be more kind and more respectful. And I think what's really important when people are testifying is that they're succinct and they're clear about the reason. But I think that's mostly, it's just being unaccustomed to seeing people wherever they're at instead of sitting there in the official chair, doing a formal.
Right.
I guess for the Maui County Council, like I said, we have advocates in the community helping those who don't have access, those out in the field, whether it's work or farming work, or showing us the damage that's being done somewhere. We've also had a few people share screen, and that was, so it'll depend on the chair at the time if they'll allow for a share screen presentation. Our testimony is limited to 3 minutes per person, and dovetailing off of what Councilmember Cowden said, just trying to be as succinct as possible in that 3 minutes to state your position on the agenda item and to explain your connection to the agenda item and then your rationale for your position on that item. And if you have any proposed amendments, our council is really open to trying to figure out a way, to minimize, foreseeable impacts to our community. So if there's a way that we can work together with the community member who's testifying on amending the language or adding, a different perspective in, then we'll do that. We've done that a lot of times now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
For myself, I have not yet had the privilege of being able to be on a hearing where we have members of the public testifying. But I think one of just to echo, I think my colleagues on here is to be, as Keani said, or as Councilmember Rawlins said, to be as succinct as possible, to get your point across and have your points written down so that when you do testify, you know exactly what you're going to talk about and why you're going to hit it. And I think also when there's this decorum that I think is also necessary, and especially at the legislature, I think that members of the legislature are very used to being addressed as chair and vice chair and members of the committee, and having that in your testimony as you write it down. I know for myself, I've been really nervous in the past, and it's really great when you have something that you can look at and open and say, okay, thank you so much, chair this person, chair that person, and members of the committee on education or finance or whatever it may be. And you just have these things that are kind of just, you have to get them in there. So if they're just written down, then you're not as nervous testifying. So those are some extra things to add. And then also, I think now just you have social media access, and I think a lot of legislators have it in their head that my constituents are going to contact me via social media. And my class of the freshman class this year we're all very young. A majority of us, or a handful of us, are under 35. So you have people that are very used to utilizing social media, that are used to responding via social media. So if you have something that's important to you and you want to get it to a committee member, try it on social media. I've had a lot of people reach out via Facebook and Instagram.
Great points, great points. Okay, I think I'm going to head to the chat box, and I know Kathy Wyatt asked a really good question meant for all three of you. How has the budget in your counties or at the state level been affected by the pandemic? How did you change it, or how are you going to, how is it going to be changed, I guess, going forward if it's the state legislature? And I know that Councilmember Rawlins-Fernandez also took a good stab at that already and gave a very robust answer in the chat box. But if you could, again, Councilmember Rawlins-Fernandez, just kind of expound on your answer for the benefit of everyone who may not be reading the chat box. So if you could each take a stab at that question. Thank you.
Okay, and then I'll just read what I wrote in the chat box so everyone is privy to what was written there. Yes, our county budget was impacted with financial shortfalls from our wastewater because of the reduction in tourists, and solid waste because restaurants weren't allowed to operate for a time. We also anticipated not receiving transient accommodation tax from the state, which is approximately $23.4 million. The mayor crafted the budget pre-pandemic, so the council worked really hard with the administration, the departments to substantially reduce the budget. And we did that by deferring some of the CIP projects. Those were large, had large price tags to them. We also went through the operating budget to work with the department to see if, again, if new hires or new positions or equipment could be held off for at least a year. And then, we're likely to use that same strategy to see if we'd be able to defer one more year. So the things that were urgent, we funded. And then the things that, we were able to wait a year, then we held off, and we'll have to make that decision again this year. But one of the things that really helped us to balance our budget was the tax reform that we went through in the first term. And so we're able to, still generate the amount of revenue that we needed, but at the same time provide tax relief to our residents and our businesses. Mahalo.
That's a fine balance there. Generating enough revenue, but not doing too many increases in taxes. So we'll have to learn from your county. Okay, any other responses on budget? Go ahead, Councilmember
I
Cowden.
can answer a little bit. We have had a rainy day fund. We've been pretty good at always holding some money back. Sometimes we get punished pretty hard for that, like when we're negotiating union raises. We've decided this is a rainy day, so we have some of that money. We will definitely miss that 14 million that we get in the transit accommodation tax. With our real property taxes, we've been deferring it. We give people a grace period. Our county is structured in a way where we can't just drop it. In some ways, like people who own TVRs, they would love to get a break. And it's the type of things that's causing the forcings of properties to sell, and that's been hard. We've deferred some maintenance, some roads that didn't really need to be redone. We haven't done that. We've raised our taxes for the non-resident investors and lowered the thresholds because we have a good number of empty houses and we have people who need to be in the houses. So we've raised that. We're thinking about, I'm not real excited about it, but having parking costs in public parks, things like that. I don't know if it's going to be worth the difference, but we also aren't, obviously traveling, a lot less events. Anywhere we can cut, we have. And then our departments have been pretty good at narrowing down their costs individually. So as a council, we're not having to just go through and shop at them. At least last time we didn't have to. I think this season is going to be worse. This time it's going to be harder because we have used some of that rainy day money.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rep. Kapela?
Yeah, I do not sit on the finance committee, but one thing that I will reiterate, and Lisa, you actually mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that we're facing this over $1 billion shortfall in our budget. And the biggest issue this year is really finding new ways to plug that budget shortfall. And one of the things that my office is working on is just revenue generation. That's one thing we're going to focus on. Right now, I think we have a really good shot at introducing some more progressive legislation that people have kind of turned away from or shied away from, but we don't really have a choice anymore because we need funds. And if we want to fund fully funded public schools that are actually quality, and we want to be able to make sure that we have a living wage and we have paid sick and family leave, we need the money to do it. So that's one of the things that my office is going to be focusing on. And I think that we have a shot at legalizing marijuana or creating a carbon tax or taxing the rich, because there are people that have done really well during this pandemic while others have lost their jobs and can't afford to put food on the table anymore. So one thing that has been really stressed to us is to not put any legislation forward that has a finance tag or money that's attached. So to be very cautious of that. So if you have legislation that you're thinking about as an advocate, asking the legislator to introduce, I would take a second look on, does this include money? Do I need money to make this happen? Is there another way that I can do this, or something else that I can advocate for my organization that doesn't necessarily include a lot of money? So I would ask that you look at that, because unfortunately, even legislators like myself that want to put forward legislation that funds these things that we need, that are so vital to our communities, they're not going to pass this year. This is not. So to look in other avenues and in different directions on how we can still lift our communities. And then of course, supporting revenue generating bills.
Sure. And I do understand that this session, GIAs are not going to be offered available grants and aids, typically for nonprofits. And so I think that's been kind of widely circulated, that piece of information. But I do appreciate, Rep. Kapela, that you're taking a stab at this, because unlike the county councils that have been meeting throughout the year, you know, the legislative session has yet to convene. And so appreciate your sort of prognosticating with us. Okay, so trying to make our way through the chat box. Somebody else, I think the next question is, a follow-up question that Kathy is asking around budgetary issues before we move to another question is if we know if the governor has dipped into the state rainy day fund. Does anybody know that?
I don't know, but I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay. Moving on to the other, I think there were questions back to testifying remotely, and I think Christy and perhaps somebody else had questions about how to spruce up our virtual testimony. Are there any rules, regulations, pro tips that we should know about how to kind of show up on the radar of legislators in a busy season with our virtual testimony?
In our, I mean, we watch everybody's testimony, and so I don't think you need a tip other than to just put it in there. And obviously, the more well-informed your testimony is, you know, the better it's going to be able to be addressed. I think a lot of times calling ahead of time and actually having a conversation with several different council members, that's really the way to do it, because just like what Rep. Kapela is saying, if we hear about it that morning, no matter how well you've presented it, it's not near as good as if we've gotten it 4 or 5 days in advance, or that we have been able to have background conversations. I think at least on an island as small as ours, you have the opportunity to contact all 7 of the council members. And because we are at large, we all care about everybody. So you don't need to just go to your district. You can go to any of us, but you can only go to 2 of us at a time. And when people are proactive, they're going to get more effective outcomes.
Yeah, I'll echo what Councilmember Cowden is saying. If you know, members in the community are able to either email us or call us ahead of time to share some of their thoughts, perspective, proposed amendments, then that would be best, and then we can, you know, work together before the day of the meeting. And, you know, the council member would be able to propose those amendments on the floor, you know, to make those changes that the community is asking for. Because we're, you know, on this remote virtual platform, we are more sensitive to when testifiers share their testimony. And as the budget chair, I have pulled the brakes on something, you know, like acquisition of land, when I've learned about if the title is cloudy and if there was Kuleana land, and there's questions surrounding that. I have stopped an item learning about that at testimony. So even though the testifier didn't contact me beforehand, you know, for me, it was alarming enough to just defer the discussion until we were able to get more information. But, you know, like Member Cowden is saying, the more information you're able to provide us as soon as possible, the better. And because our testimony is only 3 minutes, if members of the community would be able to submit written testimony with any of the, you know, works cited or visual aids, you know, or, you know, just like heavy detail, then that would be good in writing. and then just highlighting what you have in your written testimony during your oral testimony. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Rep. Kapela, do you have anything to add to that on the state side?
Yeah, on the state side, it's very large, right? We have many, many members, so it's a little bit harder to reach all of them. But going back to that Capitol website, you can actually see what members are on specific committees. And that's a really great way, I think, right now, since we're so digital, to be able to get some information about your organization or the specific bill to those legislators that are about to hear your piece of legislation. So that way you can kind of single out those specific people. And I think in the building, I've learned that legislators really like stats. So if you have very specific facts and stats and data and other places that have done something similar, and now Hawaii is adopting something like that, having that information and being able to send it is very, very beneficial. And I understand from an advocacy standpoint, stats can be very dangerous because they misrepresent, or that just puts a number to an issue and people. But in the building, stats are very helpful, because they want something that's going to be, and I want something that's also going to be a hard number that also represents those people as well. So I would say add that in.
Yeah, thank you. I missed an element of Christy's question as I'm rereading the chat box, and she is asking about testimony versus petitions. Are petitions going to resonate with you all this year? I know Rep. Kapela said, demonstrating the issue in social media is also some form of a petition in terms of number of likes and, level of dialogue around some of these issues that could be kind of demonstrated through social media. But what about that good old-fashioned petition?
I think it can be helpful. I think legislators listen to people who they represent. So if they see a name that they know from their community, I think it will really resonate with them and can be very helpful. So I think more information is always better to get to a legislator. And if you can, and you have the time to create a petition with that person's name, maybe what district or area they live in, and who their representative or senator is, I think that could be very beneficial to your movement.
Yeah, I'll echo what Rep. Kapela said. It can be very helpful, but it's, I think community members, just being mindful of what the item is. So sometimes a lot of numbers will be helpful for specific things, like stopping, something from happening. But it's that balance of numbers, just the sheer number of people testifying, and then, but also weighing the substance of the testimony. So as Rep. Kapela was saying, just data-driven testimony or real personal experience and how a proposed bill or resolution could impact that person. So only that person would be able to speak to the impact on them. And so it's really important to make it personal if possible. So if doing a petition, if their community members are able to, add a sentence. I know change.org and other, move on petition websites, you're able to add why you're signing the petition. And I think that is also very helpful.
And I want to add, Rep. Kapela did say, where you're from, because if you put your town or where it is, because sometimes when there's a change.org, you might get 60,000 people wanting the Humane Society to do something, but they're from all over the world. So that's not so compelling. What I do find is when it's something like, say they want a speed limit change, or a sign, a no parking sign, or some very specific thing. If there's a tax map key and there's a picture of that tax map key, and maybe it's colored yes is yellow and no is red, or some sort of thing like that, and or even if it's just colored in and then they've got the names, that's all the people in that area, this is how they feel. That's quite compelling when you're looking at a neighborhood issue. And what I'm going to agree with Council Member Rawlins-Fernandez is that when it's a broad issue, I really care. I way rather have simple and unsophisticated emails than a very sophisticated same email sent to me 150 times. I try and respond to everything. And then of course, I'm just going to cut and paste in my response if it's the exact same thing. But if somebody says why it matters to them, if it matters to them, it matters to me. And so you don't have to have a PhD to write a good testimony. I just want to know who you are, why it matters to you, and why your suggestion you think would help. And that's the most compelling to me, is to hear those specifics.
Mm-hmm. Mahalo for all of you for those comments. And thank you, Sandy Ma from Common Cause Hawaii. She's put a lot of good resources in the chat box, contact information for each of our panelists, as well as for anybody who's interested in the current version of the governor's package, of his version of the budget. And she does qualify that may change as we speak, as it's still a little early in the process. But good for everybody to study. At this point, I guess I want to ask a general. I didn't catch any other questions in the chat box, but is there anybody moved in our Zoom room at the moment who would like to verbalize a question for our panelists? And no pressure to come on camera if you want to just sort of voice your question. Oh, yes, please. I think it was Kathy Wyatt raising her hand. Go ahead.
I'm a member of the Kukua Council, Kukua Council, and then Kapuna Caucus, and a bunch of other things that we're all interested in the Kapuna issues. Okay, and one of the things that we're talking a lot about is the vaccination process. And one of the biggest issues is, like somebody mentioned in the chat room over here, about people with mental handicaps and people with dementia that live alone, and how they're going to be notified on how to get the vaccination. So it's just so, I guess, frustrating to me that there is no firm plan. I mean, this being developed, but we've known about this since October, and I'm not trying to be a naysayer, but it's just frustrating. So I know, because I'm on PABIA as well, the Deborah Stonewalls and Derek and Kealoha, we're talking at PABIA on Friday about this as well. So that there's a big plan. They're trying to make a plan to contact all of these people that, like the dementia folks that live by themselves, and the unsheltered, like you talked about earlier too. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? And have you been involved in any of the planning for that?
So I've had a number of discussions especially regarding our kupuna, and maybe people who don't have a doctor, because I think in my community, there are a lot of people that there are a lot of kupuna that don't have a doctor. And that's really the way that we've been told that if you are in the kupuna age where you can get your vaccine in one of those first groups, but you're not in a care home, you will be going through your primary care physician. And many people don't have a primary care physician where you don't have access to a primary care physician. We haven't gotten a solid answer on that. When I spoke about it, it was kind of I think it seemed like one of the first times that people had been hearing about an issue like that. So I hear you when you say you're frustrated, because I know many of my colleagues were also very frustrated with just the lack of communication and a lack of a plan. So please know that we feel this frustration, and it's something that we are working on, and we're trying. I know myself as well. But I think as any advocate, we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep going back to the source, and we have to keep raising our voice to advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves. So thank you for bringing this up today.
On Kauaʻi, you know, this is really a Department of Health issue more than it is a county issue. That's why I paused. But you asked specifically about our houseless community, which is something that I have a strong focus on as I'm committee chair for public safety and human services. And by the way, I was houseless as a kid, so I connect with that community without judgment. We have a social services outreach that goes out to our different encampments, you know, maybe once every few weeks. We just invested, the county just invested in like a portable bus type of program that's coming around that actually will be giving shots if people want them. You know, we're trying to get that infrastructure. A lot of our houseless community, I'd say over half of it is over 65. With our Agency on Elderly Affairs, they've really stepped up heavily in the last month to be having emotional services being given out. We have ways to where people can call there. Like, you're lucky if you're over 65 now, because our county Agency on Elderly Affairs is taking these calls and stepping people through to solutions on their problems. And I'm going to give a point to many people who are without housing. Their identification has been stolen, and the longer it's stolen, the more their life capacity and stability has cascaded. That is a real weak point that I hope at our state level we find better ways to be able to help people get another identification. You can't get, you become unbankable, you can't have a mail place, you can't do anything. I can tell from 25 feet away, typically, if somebody doesn't have their identification. I can just look at, you know, how much struggle that they've gone through. So when we have these medical units to come out to people that will go to also not just our encampments, but to the illegal unpermitted encampments that's typically on state lands, we'll try and help them too. But we care, I care, I'm a heavy advocate for that community. And I believe in those people, and that number is growing. And the ones who have the biggest cascade of difficulty are the ones who've gone from stability to instability because they aren't experienced the way people who have dealt with this for 5-10 years. So I think the state really needs to engage.
Any Councilmember Rawlins-Fernandez, any comments?
Hello, Lisa. Yes, as Councilmember Cowden said, it's, you know, Department of Health. There's that information on prioritization for Maui County right now. They're doing about 200 to 300 vaccinations per day at the Maui Memorial Medical Center. And then I think Molokai is still waiting for our vaccinations, as well as Lanai.
Mahalo for that.
I feel your frustration as well.
I think we've run out of time on this Sunday afternoon, and Sandy has put the link to all of the other offerings in our series. This is the last one in our series. So if you want to view any of those other programs, feel free to go to the link that she provides. I actually put in information on a lobbyist training that if any of you are wanting to engage, certainly at the state level, it would be really good to try and catch this lobbyist training that the Ethics Commission is offering. I know that at the county levels, there's guidelines for how to engage with your county council members as well. So please look to those websites, those county websites, to make sure you're understanding how to be compliant in your lobbying at the county level as well. I also included, I had mentioned to Rep. Kapela that there had been the Pacific Law Institute held a webinar on Friday. I think some of you have maybe attended that one. And it was featuring the Speaker, House Speaker, Senate President, as well as the majority leaders who were talking about just some of the things that Rep. Kapela mentioned that the Sergeant of Arms and basically the legislature in general has been working on to actually prepare for accommodations for legislative interaction. And so that one can be seen. It's going to be rebroadcast by Think Tech Hawaii on Friday the 15th from 9 to 10:30. And I put the link to Think Tech Hawaii's website where you can view it again. And they talk a lot about what we talked about today, but for any of you who want to get more information on that or want to share it with others who would like to know more about the process, please feel free to do so. So at this time, I'd like to thank our panelists, Representative Jeanné Kapela, and welcome to the legislature. We thank you for beginning this journey and doing this work for us and with us. Councilmember Keani Rawlins-Fernandez from Hawaii Island, thank you for all of your work and your leadership. And Councilmember Felicia Cowden from Kauaʻi County. The three of you are doing this very difficult work during unprecedented times for all of us in Hawaii, and the rules of engagement are changing daily. So we appreciate that you're doing all of your good work in your communities and on our behalf, and that you hold such important values to engage community, to engage partners like all of us. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing and the time that you're taking. So mahalo. I will, as the moderator, pass this back to Sandy and Kathleen, who will close us out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday afternoon and wrapping up our virtual policy and advocacy training series. This was to talk about how COVID-19 has changed the way we interact with our elected officials. And we had three wonderful, knowledgeable, intelligent wahine elected officials, Representative Kapela, Council members Cowden and Rawlins-Fernandez. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. We learned so much. And I want to thank Lisa Maruyama from Hano for facilitating this really vibrant discussion. So thank you, and thank everyone again for joining us. And I want to thank Kathleen Algire from Hawaii Children's Action Network, who did the bulk of the work and setting this up. So thank you, Kathleen, for carrying all the water and just letting me wrap this up. I'm going to put our elected officials' information, contact information again in the chat as the last chat message, and put the contact information for how to view the programs that have gone before and how to view this program, because this program is being recorded also. So thank you again, everyone. This has been great, and we will be doing this again next year, or a different series of programs, but we'll be doing this again, advocacy training. Thank you again, everyone.
Mahalo.
Everyone.
Thank you. Mahalo.
Aloha.
Be safe.